Reddit lawyers. What detail your client didn't tell you ruined your case? Story 1. Back when I was working for a company knee-deep in the due diligence process before snapping up a small tech startup, I ended up getting a front row seat to one hell of a sideshow. The startup COO was a popular guy charismatic, the kind who remembered birthdays and brought donuts on Fridays. People liked him, maybe a little too much. We'd been hearing low-key chatter about him being very involved both in the business and with some of the female staff. Nothing confirmed, just whispers. Then came the thunderclap. A sales rep filed HR complaints, got herself a lawyer, and suddenly there was talk of offering the coup a golden parachute to just drift away quietly. The deal would have let him walk with a decent chunk of his post-acquisition bonus. Just a clean break. I was in the room when they sat the guy down. It was him, a wall of company lawyers, and me awkwardly trying not to breathe too loud. They drilled him over and over about this woman. Every time, same answer. He'd never met with her alone. Always in meetings. Always with witnesses. And outside of work, he swore up and down, with the conviction of a man auditioning for sainthood, that he'd never once had any personal interaction. A few days later, we're in a conference room with the woman and her attorney. No COO this time. Her lawyer slides a small envelope across the table. Inside is a card that came with a bouquet graphic. Cringy, way too personal. Signed by the COO, tracked back to a florist account tied directly to his credit card. When the legal team cornered him with the evidence, he blinked, deadpan, and said, "But I didn't see her. I didn't hand her the flowers myself." Yeah, that was the end of his bonus and his job. Fired for cause, exit stage left. Story 2. This one was a simple speeding case. 70 in a 55. Nothing wild. Her record was decent, so I figured she'd do a driving course. The court would smile politely, and we'd all move on. Then I got to court. Turns out she'd been clocked going 70 up an unplowed snow-covered shoulder, zooming past a line of cars crawling through the one-plowed lane. Because they were too slow, I didn't even know 70 was physically possible on loose snow without wings. The officer said he'd already done her a favor by not charging it as reckless. The judge nodded like he'd just smelled gasoline and declined to reduce a thing. When I called her afterward, she casually confirmed it said she'd forgotten to mention that detail. Now maybe I've spent too much time below the Mason-Dixon, but I cannot fathom forgetting that you turned your car into a snowmobile on the wrong side of the road. Had I known, I would have told her not to bother hiring us, skip the class, and just pay the fine. Happens all the time, I'm honest, in consults. Instead, she paid for a lawyer, missed work for an 8-hour course, and got absolutely nothing for it. At least, she didn't argue. Story 3. I'm a court-appointed attorney handling family matters termination of parental rights. Specifically, my client? She had been hustling, really trying. Stable job? Lawful income? Decent apartment? No longer on psych meds? Emotionally present? Eager to reunite with her kids? I'd spent months negotiating with the Department of Children's Services, court services, guardian severe stakeholder in the mix. The pretrial was our shot to finally turn the tide. Morning of, I meet with her. Anything changed? She grins, confident. Nope, all good, let's get my kids. Great. That's definitely not happening today, but hey, momentum, right? We head into court. I'm armed with paperwork, timelines, and the portrait of a parent who did the hard work. And then it happens. Like a match to gasoline, she explodes unprovoked, right there in open court. She's screaming at the guardians. Everyone freezes. And in the next breathless 15 seconds, she levels everything I'd built. She's not working anymore. She lost her apartment. She despises the Guardian 7, though her kids love them. She refuses to send her kids photos of their toys. She's planning to leave the state. She believes they can live off state aid once reunited. Oh, and she's 4 months pregnant. That was the full monologue. No prompting, no filter, just firebombs. I sat there, absolutely stunned. Couldn't even clear my throat. Story 4. There's a golden rule in trial work. Never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. And yet, lawyers break it all the time, especially for the mundane stuff. This case spit on that rule. The defendant had been picked up on a warrant, cuffed, and driven straight to jail. Routine. After booking him, the arresting officer walked back to his cruiser and found something unexpected. A plastic bag of brightly colored candy right smack in the center of the back seat. Possession charge, just like that. At trial, the officer gave textbook testimony, said he always searched his vehicle before each shift, and again after anyone so much as breathed in the back seat. The defense tried to shake him, but the guy was a machine. Every detail clicked. Every word matched the report. fastidious to a fault. And that candy? It hadn't been there before the ride, but it sure was thereafter. Just when the defense attorney had nearly tapped out, he lobbed one last desperate question more out of instinct than strategy. Was anyone else in the back seat with the defendant? He probably expected a quick no. Everyone did. But the officer blinked, tilted his head, and said, "Yes, yes." Turned out, the defendant's girlfriend had been with him at the arrest scene, and since she wasn't being charged with anything, the office rever the gentleman offered to drop her off at her apartment on the way to jail. That little side trip? Not in the report. The officer never mentioned it to the prosecution. And, most astonishingly, the defendant never mentioned it to his own lawyer. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet where you could hear thought itself folding in on itself. Suddenly, there was someone else in the back seat, which meant the sweets. They weren't as solid a link as everyone assumed. Reasonable doubt bloomed like a mushroom cloud. The prosecutor gave a limp closing, barely trying. The verdict came fast, not guilty. Story 5. My dad's story, who used to work as a fraud investigator for an insurance company. He's got a vault full of wild ones, but here are two that stuck with me. First one, this guy files a claim for a stolen ring, along with a few other things, but it's the ring he keeps circling back to. Something felt off, so my dad and the insurance company's lawyer set up a deposition. The guy shows up all casual, answering questions. Nothing too out of place until my dad spots it. Right there on his finger, bold as brass, the stolen ring. He scribbles a note and slides it to the lawyer. The lawyer reads it, doesn't flinch, just keeps going. But the guy? He clocks the note handoff and immediately gets weird. Slowly drops his hands under the table. Tries to play it cool. Then, clink, the ring hits the floor. They ask him to stand up, and there it is, like a magician flubbing the finale. Second story's darker. Another guy claiming theft says his house got broken into. First red flag? The window was broken outward, like someone inside was trying to make it look like a break-in. He even submitted Polaroids of his stolen stuffed TVs, electronics, that kind of thing. But here's the kicker. In the glare on the TV screen, you could see the reflection of a store shelf. This dude had taken pictures of items still in the shop. And then there was his music collection claimed hundreds of stolen CDs and records. Every single one starting with R, S, or T. My dad figured the guy had been flipping through a catalog and just stopped mid-alphabet. Dad was about to shut the claim down face to face, but then he spotted a gun on the table. Decided to go with a phone call instead. Smart move, because a few months later, that same guy got arrested. Story 6. My mentor story. And it's now etched in my brain. Divorce trial. Tension already thick. Wife accuses husband of abuse during the marriage. Husband leans in and whispers to my mentor calm, indignant. That's absolutely not true. Mentor nods, believing him. He's got a squeaky clean image. Good dad, respected in the community. Wife had bailed on the kids, chased a lover to Florida, came back just to finalize the divorce. This should have been an easy win. So my mentor confident, Composite asks him on the stand, at any point in the marriage did you lay your hands on your wife? Dead silence. Then, well, one time we were arguing, and I held her down on the couch until she stopped yelling. You could feel the courtroom pivot. Time slowed. My mentor said it was like watching a chandelier drop in slow motion. She could hear every crystal shatter in her head. The client? Completely baffled as to why this was a problem. To him, that wasn't abuse. To the judge, however, it absolutely was. The wife walked away with a significantly larger settlement. Husband looked stunned. My mentor looked like she wanted to strangle someone, and it wasn't the judge. Story 7. A few years back, I had a client charged with being drunk in public. He told me, with impressive honesty, that yes, he was very drunk. But according to him, he'd made it to the lobby of his brother's apartment and was just waiting for his brother to come downstairs and let him up. Innocent enough, right? So I built the case around that. I brought in glossy photos of the building, floor plans, bylaws, everything I could find to prove that the lobby was secured and only accessible to residents and their guests. If I could show he wasn't technically in public, maybe I could dodge the charge altogether. Minor infractions in my state don't come with formal discovery, and there's no real incentive for plea deals. I decided to keep my powder dry and save my argument for trial. No heads up for the officer. Big mistake. The officer takes the stand and casually drops a bomb. He found my client across town. A different apartment complex altogether. The guy wasn't in the lobby. He wasn't even in the building. He was slumped over at the call box, mumbling nonsense and swaying like a tree in a windstorm. I lean over, whispering to my client, who now looks like he wants to disappear into the floor. He mutters, half to himself, "Oh, I was trying to go to my brother's. That might explain why he didn't come down. He did sound kinda mad on the phone. Brilliant. Cross-examination turned into a tragic comedy. Officer, are you absolutely sure my client was blackout drunk here and not, say, miles away at an entirely unrelated apartment building? It did not go well. My closing argument? That he wasn't that drunk. The judge didn't even blink. We got a quick guilty verdict, a small fine, and a mild slap on the wrist for violating probation. The real punishment? The hours I spent printing exhibits for a location he never even saw that night. Story 8. Catching this one late. But here's a gem from my time in the trenches. The case was a wrongful foreclosure claimer. Client said the bank had snatched their home despite them never missing a single mortgage payment. The wife was the vocal one, organized, confident. She handed us a stack of bank statements from their checking account. Different bank than the mortgage one showing consistent payments, month after month, for years. I combed through every page. Everything lined up. It looked solid. To add fuel to the fire, there was also documented proof that the foreclosure notice hadn't actually been delivered to them. The bank was confused. Our expert witnesses said, yeah, during the recession, record-keeping was a dumpster fire and wrongful foreclosures did happen. The whole thing was shaping up to be a legitimate case. We hit mediation. The bank comes in and says, something's off. One tiny inconsistency on a single bank statement. They shut down mediation and slapped down a subpoena for the original statements from the bank itself. We were ticked. Our clients were ticked. One small error? Big whoop, right? Then the subpoenaed statements came in. I sat down to compare them line by line, and that's when the truth punched me in the face. Every single month, under electronic withdrawals, there was a quiet little ghost. A line had been deleted. In its place, a mortgage payment had been added. Totals adjusted. Balances carried over with spreadsheet precision. Like a slow-moving crime novel made of PDFs. We confronted them, sat down with both statements and said, these look forged. We can either drop the case or you can walk us through this. The wife didn't hesitate. We should probably drop the case, she said. Calm, measured, like she was choosing between chicken or beef for dinner. She never admitted it, but there was no doubt. Her husband, he wasn't even on the call. Weeks later, he called, cheerful, asking how the case was going. I had to tell him everything his wife had been faking the mortgage payments, faking the lawsuit, faking everything for a year and a half. Silence on the line. The bank could have gone nuclear, filed criminal charges, but they didn't. They just said, pay our attorney's fees and walk away. Our clients took the deal. Honestly, they got off easy. Story 9. One of my shift supervisors flagged a guy for making personal calls on the office line. Pretty standard rule. Don't use company phones for private chats. Everyone signs off on it when they join. We checked the logs. And sure enough, he'd dialed the same number over a dozen times in a week. No ambiguity. The number? A close relationship hotline for men. That part didn't matter to me at all. But I figured the nature of the calls might make the conversation a little delicate, so I prepared the official warning, had it printed, set up the meeting with a witness present, and brought him in. It started calm. I asked if he was aware of the no personal calls policy. He said yes. I showed him the call records and asked if he recognized the number. Then he detonated, kicked the chair hard enough to leave a dent, screamed that we were all out to get him, and launched into a profanity parade through the call floor before storming out. Just gone. I called HR, logged everything, got statements, including one from his own witness, who looked like she'd aged a year in that 5 minutes. 2 days later, he's back, this time in a blazer, with a solicitor in tow, demanding an emergency meeting with the general manager. Apparently, I had committed a hate crime. He claimed I fired him for being boy. The solicitor wanted me fired immediately, along with a fat compensation payout. So the GM brings me in. I lay it all out, signed company policy. Call records, printed warning letters still unsigned, witness statements, the fact that he quit. Not a word in any of it about who he was calling, just that he used work phones for personal calls repeatedly during paid hours. The solicitor flipped through the evidence in slow motion, blinked a few times, then sighed like a balloon deflating. He apologized. To the GM, to me specifically for the legal threats, said his client had omitted a few key facts. Then he left physically, dragging his client out by the sleeve. And the cherry on top? 2 weeks later, a call from a manager at a different center. They were hiring. Said the guy listed me as a reference. I paused, looked at the phone, and thought, bold move. Story 10. It was supposed to be a simple bond hearing bad check case, $5K. Felony, sure, but nothing wild. Judges mostly want to know one thing. Will the client show up next time? Client's wife had hired me in tears the night before. Total panic. I didn't get to speak with the guy until minutes before the hearing. We're huddled up. I run through my checklist. Ever been in trouble before? Couple minor things. Years ago. All taken care of. Clean since then? Yeah. I've been good. Nice. So far, so good. Then I ask, ever failed to appear in court? He thinks for a beat, then goes, back in college once. I missed one. I was young. Stupid. I narrow my eyes. Are you sure it was just once? Yes, that's it. Perfect. Economic crime. Long-time community member. One youthful mistake this should sail. We get in front of the judge. I walk through the talking points. Responsible adult, stable life, one silly mistake in college, understands court obligations now. Judge nods, listening. Then, smooth as silk, he says, so this failure to appear? Just a college kid being dumb? I smile. Exactly, Your Honor. One-time lapse in judgment. He gets it now. Judge flips a page on the file. Can you explain the other 9 failures to appear showing on his record? I freeze. My spine physically tenses. My face is doing everything I don't want it to do. I glance over at my client and he's fine. Chill, no reaction, no surprise. Meanwhile, I'm cycling through panic, betrayal, and the deepest, sharpest irritation known to the legal profession. He just nods like, yeah, that tracks. I turn to the judge and say, with every ounce of dignity I can muster, I think he's in a better position to explain those right now. We got through it. Barely. Judge was furious. I was furious. Client? Still calm, like this was part of the plan. He did get bond, but only after coughing up way more cash than expected, had to lean on family to cover it. Story 11. Back in law school, I interned for a judge, and one of the first cases I sat in on involved what sounded like the pettiest high-stakes drama imaginable, an illegal lockout over branded coffee cups. The case? A franchise owner of a big-name international cafe chain claimed the landlord, who also happened to control all U.S. franchise rights, just straight-up locked him out one day. The landlord argued the franchisee had violated the agreement by selling unauthorized merchandise with the company's logo, specifically some off-brand cups. For 2 full days, all we heard about were these mysterious, allegedly illicit cups. Every witness, every cross was about these damn cups. The cups were contraband. The cups breached the lease. The cups could apparently end empires. Then finally, the landlord took the stand. Tension in the courtroom rose, and one of the defense attorneys, clearly savoring the moment, pulled out a shopping bag like he was revealing Excalibur. Us interns were on the edge of our seats. After 2 days of cup-centric buildup, we were dying to see what had caused all this chaos. But just as the evidence was about to be introduced, the landlord's memory suddenly decided to die a quiet, tragic death. First, he said he got the cups at the cafe in question. Then, a few minutes later, he claimed corporate mailed them to him. Back and forth, conflicting answers. The judge raised an eyebrow. If the source of the cups couldn't be reliably identified, they were inadmissible. So, with what can only be described as soul-crushing defeat, the attorney packed the bag away. We never saw the infamous cups. They were carried off stage like a prop in a canceled play. The courtroom exhaled. The interns deflated. Story 12. Oh man, this one's wild, and yeah, I've got one for the why am I even on trial right now? Files. I was in court facing domestic violence charges from my now ex-wife, who claimed I threw white paint all over my own car and then beat her up. That was her big opener. Meanwhile, back in reality, we'd been arguing things were already tense because I found out she'd been cheating. In the middle of that, she started going full demolition mode, chucking my stuff out the window like it was a clearance sale. I told her I was done, and that apparently flipped the final switch. She stormed outside, picked up a rock the size of a watermelon, and tried to cave in my windshield. When that didn't work, she grabbed a gallon can of white paint and wound up like she was pitching for the majors. I managed to stop her mid-throw and tossed the can aside. That's when she grabbed an ice scraper and lunged at me. I had no interest in trading blows with someone I used to love, so I restrained her, literally sat on her until she calmed down. She chilled. I got up, and immediately she sprinted to the busted open paint can, scooped paint up with both hands, and Jackson Pollocked my car with it. I tried to retrieve the last of my stuff from the front door, and she went for the grand finality to kick me in the family jewels. I caught her foot mid-air, told her to calm down, and during her ninja spin to yank her leg back, she slammed it into the doorframe and bruised her own foot. I left. She called the cops, flipped the script, and suddenly I was the monster. Trial day comes, and she puts on the full Lifetime movie performance. Soft voice, trembling hands, tragic stare, says I slammed her foot in the door, painted my own car, and assaulted her. Then my lawyer pulls out the photos of my car just completely Jackson Pollocked, paint all over. Then comes the real kicker. Police photos of her injuries, and her hands are coated in white paint, like she dipped them straight in. And surprise! Mid-trial, the cheating comes up. Motive activated. Story 13. Road traffic accident. Looked like a slam dunk. My client was clipped when the defendant suddenly swerved off the motorway to take an exit he'd nearly missed. All the evidence lined up nicely. Then the defendant takes the stand. He calmly says that after the crash, my client's passenger friend of hers told him that she wasn't looking. Damning, if true. So we bring the friend up to testify. This friend is Polish, has lived in the UK for 10 years, and has been chatting with us in perfectly good English the whole time. When asked about the alleged statement, he replies, deadpan, "I don't speak English, so I couldn't have said that." I could feel our barrister turn to look at me, slowly, like someone just pulled the pin out of a grenade and handed it over. Then there was the gender discrimination case. Client claimed she was fired after applying for maternity leave. If true, illegal. If they made her redundant for genuine business reasons, legal. We explained the difference to her, repeatedly, carefully. Night before the hearing, we're running through what the employer's side will say. We ask, they're going to claim they told you it was redundancy. What's your response to that? She nods confidently. Oh yeah, that's what they told me. I aged 5 years in 5 seconds. Story 14. I was a public defender intern between my 2L and 3L year. Had one of those limited licenses could practice under supervision, mostly handling the low-stakes stuff like arraignments. Good experience, low risk, in theory. That morning, we meet our guy before his arraignment. Charges are drug-related. He's calm, sober, and says he's guilty, doesn't want to fight it. Just wants help with his candy problem. Yes, his words. My supervising attorney tells him he's a great fit for the drug court diversion program, but explains that the first step is to plead not guilty so we can work out the deal with the prosecutor. The whole process is laid out in detail. The guy nods along, engages, asks a couple relevant questions, seems completely with it. Then my supervisor turns to him and says, "Hey, would you be okay if my intern handled the arraignment?" All he'll do is say, "Not guilty." Client shrugs. Sure, I'm thrilled. It's my first actual on-record court moment. About an hour later, I'm suited up, seated next to my guy, ready to speak. When it's our turn, I stand tall and say, "Not guilty. Nailed it. Inner fist pump." Then the judge looks at my client. "Sir, do you have any questions for the court?" And with the sweetest, most casual innocence, "Yeah, can I just confess now? There was this noise in my head like someone had smacked a tuning fork into my soul." Even the judge looked like he felt bad for me, like he wanted to reach over the bench and offer me a juice box and a hug. "Sir," the judge said gently, "I think you need to consult with your counsel." Cue my supervising attorney, who stepped up, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I've got it from here." I backed away like a shamed raccoon caught rifling through someone's garbage. Story 15. I had a case come my way once that was basically the legal equivalent of an Uno reverse card. A friend of mine had leased a house in his name standard setup. 3 guys, 1 lease, party central. For a while, it was all beer and barbecue. Then, 6 months in, he meets a girl, gets serious, and moves in with her. The lease stays in his name, but he trusts the other 2 guys when they say they'll handle the rent and keep the place decent. Spoiler, they didn't. One by one, the original crew ghosts out, and new randoms move in. At some point, rent stops getting paid altogether. The agent gives a courtesy call evictions coming. So naturally, the people still living there throw one final apocalyptic party and absolutely obliterate the house. My friend, now very much not living there, gets a call from the agent. He rings me up asking for help, so I load my car with plaster, paint, all the usual patch and pray rental repair gear. We show up and it's a war zone. Cupboards? Gone. What remained of them had been fed to a bonfire in the backyard. Doors were either missing or splintered like they'd been attacked by a battering ram. The walls had gaping holes that looked like a linebacker had been hurled through them. Every room was worse than the last. The yard looked like someone tried to host a motocross race and lost. There was no salvaging this place. It was going to need a full-gut job. My friend's panicking. Understandably. He talks to his dad, who calls a lawyer buddy. First thing the lawyer asks for? The lease. So we head to the agent, who grimly hands over a copy of the lease along with a scan of the ID my friend used to sign it. Damage bill? Roughly half the value of the house. We take the paperwork to the lawyer. He flips through it silently, then pauses on the ID, stifles a chuckle, then says, "You were 17 when you signed this?" My friend nods, confused. You can't legally sign a lease if you're under 18. This contract's worthless. We just stared at him. Back to the agent we go. We point out the whole minor signing, a binding contract issue. The agent completely loses outrage, disbelief, probably grief, but there's nothing they can do. Legally, the lease never existed. They even had to return the bond. Friend signs lease at 17. House gets obliterated. Agent tries to come after him. Turns out he wasn't old enough to legally sign anything. Whole disaster wiped clean. Story 16. Our client was a home health aide, worked with the elderly, the kind who live alone and need someone to help them through the day-to-day. She'd been hired to care for this older gentleman. And about a year into the job, he rewrote his will, left everything to her. We're talking a house, some investments, and a stack of savings. Total value? $4 million. Naturally, the man's only living family, a great niece he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, essence like a vulture, sues our client for undue influence, claiming she manipulated the guy in his final years. Our client swore it wasn't like that, said they just got close. She even left her job to care for him full-time. They went on little trips, spent holidays together. Seemed like a sweet, if unconventional, bond. Emails even showed him talking about changing his will. The only eyebrow raiser was one message where she joked they should just get married and be done with all the paperwork. We prepped the hell out of her for the deposition. She was, let's say, eccentric, not someone who made a warm first impression. So we worked overtime, mock depositions, every possible angle, every trap laid out in advance. Then came the deposition. First 10 minutes in, they ask her about her relationship history. She says she's been married 3 times. Check, we knew that. Then, with a straight face, she adds that she's been engaged 11 times, but always broke it off because her fiancés didn't make enough money to support her lifestyle. I felt my soul leave my body. It only got worse. She casually dropped that while she's never technically been arrested, she did spend 2 weeks in jail for contempt after hiding evidence in another lawsuit. 16 hours over 2 days. That's how long the deposition lasted. She spent most of it insulting the opposing counsel, forgetting basic things like her phone number, and flipping between smug and manic. We tried pulling her aside during breaks, reminding her of our prep, begging her to stick to the plan. No dice. Then, during one of the breaks, I'm in the restroom and catch her popping what looked like a handful of pills. For my anxiety, she says, like we're talking about chewing gum. Story 17. I was knee-deep in a visitation and child support mess with my ex over our 3-year-old. We'd both moved on, both remarried, but that didn't seem to help the chaos. The order was simple. He was to pick up our son from my house at 6 p.m. every other Friday. What he actually did was show up at 9 p.m., more not at all. Sometimes the next morning. No heads up, no apology, just a knock on the door like we'd been sitting in suspended animation waiting for him. And this was before smartphones were in everyone's pocket. But we both had cell phones. He just didn't use his for things like parenting or courtesy. So after one too many no-shows, my husband and I got a little creative. We set up our old-school camcorder, yes, this was over 20 years ago, in the living room. It was perfectly angled to catch the evening news on TV for a timestamp, the home phone, silent as a tomb, and the driveway gloriously empty. We kept it up for 6 months. Court day arrives. He tells his lawyer that he was always on time, that we were refusing to let him see his son. The judge asks us to step into a room with our attorneys to try working things out. The opposing counsel, a sharp woman named Moaz's, no time. She comes for my lawyer like a heat-seeking missile, accusing us of being liars, manipulators, keeping a father from his child. My lawyer, cool as ice and 8 months pregnant with twins, says nothing at first. Then she reaches down, picks up one of 5 large bags we brought, and gently places it on the table. This, she says, is full of tapes showing the nights he didn't show up. You'll find timestamps, a silent phone, and a very empty driveway. All the bags are the same. Shall we ask the judge to join us for a viewing? M stares, blinks, then asks for the room. The conference that followed with my ex was so loud the judge had to send someone in to tell them to keep it down. We walked out with exactly what we asked for, which, to be fair, was fair. Story 18. So, some backstory. My sister was in college, doing the full grind, working, studying, raising a baby. The guy she was with? From our reservation, known by just about everyone in the worst kind of way. Our family didn't like him, not because he was from the res, but because his name came with a long list of red flags. We knew she deserved better. He didn't work. Said he sold candy, which we all knew was code for not candy. Meanwhile, she was out there making things happen. holding the family together with scholarship money and pure willpower. After the baby was born, he suddenly got real interested in spending time with his son from another relationship. He said it was important that the siblings bond. Sure, noble idea, except he wasn't footing the bill. My sister used her refund checks to pay for travel, diapers, everything. She never once asked us for help, just made it work. Then one day, she packed up her things, took her daughter, and vanished. Turns out the entire relationship 3 or 4 years was a cycle of abuse, manipulation, and that candy habit he clung to. Looking back, yeah, the signs were there. But at the time, it hit us hard. The weeks after were chaos. We helped her move, set up somewhere safe, and brace for the legal battles. He started spiraling, throwing fits, threatening court to fight for custody. He had already lost custody of his first kid, which raised a ton of questions. Was it the drug use? The violence? The fact that his biggest financial contribution was selling off-brand Skittles? Court date comes around. My sister gets temporary full custody. He's pushing for visitation rights, which she really didn't want, but she's trying to be patient, follow the process. Then comes the second hearing. He's late, not a shock. But when he does show up, he reeks of alcohol. It's 10 a.m., and he walks in like it's last call at the bar. He immediately starts arguing with the judge. It turns out he thought this hearing was for custody, not visitation. And apparently that's all it took to push him over the edge. He yells, then curses, then picks up a chair and throws it at the judge. Yeah, security tackled him mid-meltdown. Total courtroom chaos. They run his name, and boom, he's got multiple warrants. They cuff him on the spot. My sister walked out of that courthouse with full custody and hasn't heard a single word from him since. Honestly, none of us have. It's like he evaporated into thin air. And the best part? In the previous hearing, when the judge asked if he had any issues with alcohol or anger, he said with full confidence, "No, Your Honor." Then showed up drunk and threw furniture. Classic. Story 19. Oh man, this one still lives rent-free in my head. It wasn't even my client, she belonged to a colleague. But I was there, front row, when it all unraveled in real time. So, the client's on probation. Nothing dramatic, some candy-related charge. And not the hard stuff either, just your everyday sweet leaf. But the terms were clear: stay clean, not forever. Just while on probation, she knew this. Her lawyer reminded her constantly. "You will be tested at the courthouse," he told her, more than once. "You need to be clean at least a few days before." He wasn't asking for sainthood, just a brief pause on puffing the pixie dust. She swore up and down she was good. Absolutely, totally clean, promised. Court day comes. We're sitting around with the usual parade of bad decisions and delayed resolutions. Then, it's her turn. Judge looks down from the bench. Calm, professional. "Miss Smith, are you clean today?" She doesn't flinch. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge nods. "Great. The bailiff will take you for your test. Hang tight." That was the moment. You could see it hit her. Like a ghost walked through her. She hadn't expected to actually be tested. Not right then. Not immediately. 5 minutes pass. Then 10. Bailiff comes back alone. She's gone. She didn't just duck into the restroom or loiter in the hallway. She Houdini'd straight out of the courthouse. Evaporated. Left a client-shaped hole in the air behind her. Needless to say, the judge was not entertained. Papers shuffled faster, jaw clenched tighter, fury slow boiling under the robes. They picked her up by the end of the day. She was dirty, of course. That much was expected. But what really sealed her fate wasn't the failed test, it was the bolt. The judge felt lied to, played, disrespected. She went from "just make it a few more weeks" to "welcome back to jail" in under 12 hours. All she had to do was not breathe candy for like 3 days. Instead, she blew up her own landing. Story 20. I wasn't the lawyer, but I was smack in the middle of it as a witness. My sister-in-law was only 5 when her dad passed away. In his will, he left her the house fully paid off. Her mom, who makes Cinderella's stepmom look like a role model, was supposed to hold it in trust until she came of age. Instead, she played puppet master for the next 2 decades, keeping full control until my SIL was in her mid-20s. At 25, my SIL gets a foreclosure notice in the mail. First, she thinks it's a scam, but noise real. And with it comes the discovery that there's a 400-0 mortgage on the house she didn't know existed. That house was supposed to be hers, free and clear. Turns out her mother and older half-brother had forged her signature to get the mortgage. They split the money like a heist crew. And it gets better. The notary who verified the signature? The brother's wife. The mortgage broker? Mom's sister. They had the whole con running like a family business. We're locked in legal battle for over a year. The mom and brother never outright deny it. They just keep spinning it as, Well, she lived there her whole life. That's 18 years of rent and food. We were just taking back what was ours. Like basic parenting now comes with a retroactive invoice. Then we're in court. The mother is on the stand, getting grilled by our attorney about the forged documents. She's doing her usual bit smug, dismissive, acting like the whole thing is beneath her. Until the attorney gets to a question about the signature itself. Without missing a beat, she snaps. "That's not my signature, that's my son's." The whole courtroom froze. Our attorney blinked. The other attorney's jaws hit the floor. Even the judge leaned back like someone had just thrown a chair. You could feel the air get sucked out of the room. She basically confessed to a felony conspiracy in front of a judge because she couldn't stop herself from being rude. Story 21. My sister-in-law. I'm not a lawyer, just someone who got dragged through 2 years of absolute madness. She'd been seriously abusing our nephew. Not one-off bad days, but a long, documented spiral. We tried to help, got child services involved, but eventually they told her straight he'd be removed. She called us, said she was done, told the social worker off, and asked if we'd just take him already. We said yes. She signed over guardianship and custody in front of a notary. Kid came to live with us. She dipped. Nearly 3 years later, she pops back up and takes us to court. Wants him back, and not just that, she files to erase us from his life. Her case? That we'd kidnapped him, that she'd never abused him, that child services was never involved, and that we bribed the notary to fake the custody paperwork. Her lawyer somehow believed all of this. In fact, her lawyer gets bold and requests the release of all child welfare records related to our nephew and my SIL, thinking, I assume, that there would be nothing. What the judge received instead was a stack of full file documenting social worker visits, warnings, interventions, reports from the time the boy was 6 months old up until the day she signed him over to us. Even I learned things I hadn't known. My SIL didn't show up that day, or the next, or ever again. Ghosted her lawyer entirely. The trial ended the next day. We walked out with an even stronger custody order and an award for court costs, including a large portion of our attorney fees. The judge also dropped a little bonus. She'd have to pay off every cent of those costs before she could file anything against us again. Story 22. Oh man, that's the kind of whiplash you feel in your stomach. So I was volunteering at an advice center, pretty basic stuff, helping people with housing, benefits, the usual bureaucratic nightmares. One day, this guy walks in, real sad sack energy, telling me he's been unfairly evicted and is now homeless. He said he'd been living in a council flat, which, for the non-UK crowd, is essentially gold-plated, affordable housing owned by the local council. In our area, getting one is like winning a small, slightly damp lottery. Waitlists go on for years, unless you're in crisis mode, homeless, disabled, fleeing something awful, that kind of thing. His story: he had to leave the UK for a while because of a family illness, but he kept paying the rent. He even asked another family to look in on the flat and make sure everything stayed in good shape. Then the council found out, lost their minds, and told him he was being evicted for breaking the lease. And now he was out on the street, totally blindsided, heartbroken. He didn't speak much English, so he kept saying stuff like, they talk leasehold, freehold. I don't know these things. I'm nodding along, getting all worked up on his behalf. Like, how dare they? The man had a family emergency. He kept up his rent. He was looking after the place. So I get on the phone to the housing officer, full crusader mode, ready to make some impassioned plea. The officer lets me go for about 30 seconds before politely cutting in. Yeah, so he didn't just let someone check on the place. He went to a commercial lettings agency, claimed he owned the flat, signed paperwork, and rented it out for 6 months to a family at 4 times what he was paying in council rent. I just stared at the wall like it might somehow rewind the conversation. They hadn't gone to the police yet, but they absolutely could have. Straight up fraud. Meanwhile, the poor family who moved in had to scramble for another place because, surprise, the guy renting to them never owned the flat to begin with. And the kicker? He came to the advice center acting like he was the victim. I still have no idea what his game plan was. Did he think no one would check? That volunteers had some kind of magic override button? Whatever it was, I just sat there, quietly filing my righteous fury back into its drawer and trying not to make eye contact with anyone for the next 10 minutes.